So I was wondering if it was possible to make a frequency modulated synth sound, but without actually using a frequency modulation synth. I figure it probably is because everything is possible in the world of magical audio, but I actually have no idea how it could work. And do I even know how FM synths work? I think I do. Hold on, let's think this through. Okay, as far as I understand, so let's have an audio signal that goes like this. A frequency modulation is taking another audio signal and manipulating this. So we can take a really fast signal like that and modulate this by that, which gives us this kind of strange amalgamation of both things, which introduces strange harmonics. Actually, wait, that might be wrong. Let's go back to Ableton. Okay, let's think this through a little bit more intelligently, maybe. So I got Operator, which is a FM synth inside Ableton. And what I've done is I've got the first oscillator and second oscillator, which are both the same pitch, both a basic sine wave. And what I have set the algorithm to is just every single one outputs individually. So as you'll see, as I play this and introduce the second oscillator, which is also the exact same pitch, it basically does nothing to the output signal. Still just a sine wave. If I increase this by a couple and I introduce a additional harmonic, very subtly altering that. If I do a really high harmonic, you see it modifies the sine wave. But it's additive. It's not messing up the sine wave, it's just adding to it. However, if I were to change this algorithm to this first one, you can see that this guy is modulating this guy. So B is modulating A. So if I set that again to the same pitch, which as we saw in the other algorithm just was the same resulting value because they were adding the same thing together. This time, watch what happens. It's modulating the sine wave itself to introduce this little strange kind of dip in the original sine wave. So the question I have is, can we do this without using an FM synth? Can I take some raw sine waves, some other oscillators, maybe some other tools inside Ableton to create an FM sound from scratch using these principles of frequency modulation? I don't know. I guess this video could be a complete failure. We're going to find out. We'll find out. So it would be unfair to use Operator as it is a FM synth. So let's try a different instrument, something that is not an FM synth. Why don't we just go with analog? All right, let's record a snippet of that and save it as audio. We have just recorded that and bounced it out to audio. It's a sine wave. I need to take an additional sound. Maybe I'll do a higher pitch version of this that we can then use to modulate this sound. In order to get an actual frequency modulation sound, I can't just pick any random note. I need to ensure that it is a harmonic of this note. How can I do that manually? I guess I could just go to Operator and find out what the harmonics of this note are, but let's see if I can do a more intelligent way of discovering what the next harmonics are for this F1 note. Okay, turns out it's actually really easy to work out what a given harmonic is based on the fundamental. So this is the equation, super simple. So a harmonic at a given degree from the fundamental is equal to that degree times by the fundamental. So in the case of our F1 note, which has a fundamental of about 85. Actually, let's go 86. Plugging in that fundamental of about 86. Wow, just drawing all over the thing. If we want to get the second harmonic for that fundamental, then the harmonic at 2 is just equal to 2 times 86 fundamental. So our second harmonic is 172. I can then grab that and use that to modulate, but I think I'm going to try and find one a little bit higher. I want to get let's say the sixth harmonic. So the sixth harmonic is about 516. 516 seems to be about C4. So I'll record a C4. Boom. Right, here's our sixth harmonic. Well, it sounds nice together, doesn't it? And that gives us this very pretty. So now that I've got those two basic fundamentals, I need to work out how can I modulate that bass sound with the higher frequency sound. And I don't even know if that's possible with Ableton to do that. This is the part where, oh, the video sucks. Let's see how this goes. I may have some bad news. I don't know that this is possible. I was looking up the devices in Ableton Live. Doesn't seem like anything lets you modulate audio sources at audio pitch rates. They can only go at control rates, which are much slower. So like the LFO tool, for example, is going to be much slower than a audio rate that you actually need it to go at. But there may be a way for us to salvage this and switch from frequency modulation to ring modulation. The shifter tool apparently has a sidechain section that we might be able to use to route the audio from that second harmonic into the bass harmonic. We may end up with something that is very similar to a frequency modulated sound, but through a different means. So that's what we're going to try now. Okay, so I've checked a shifter on this, and I'm going to switch the mode from pitch shifting to ring modulation, and then we're going to set the input. Oh, crap. Can't do it. Okay. Let's see. It only allows it to come from the MIDI. Okay, that might be okay, but we'd have to get the MIDI to be from the actual C4 note rather than from the audio itself. Damn, I don't think this is possible. All right, let's see. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna set a MIDI note to be C4 and use that as the control, which I think essentially will just create an LFO, a sine wave if I set this to sine inside the shifter itself. So it's effectively the same thing as creating a C4 sine wave, but generated from within shifter as opposed to being generated from analog. Crap. All right, let's just see. Let's see what happens. Okay, we are somewhere here. So if I turn the shifter off and play this, so that's our F1 sine wave. Turning the shifter on, ring modulation, and the MIDI is coming from analog, which is playing the C4. The coarse tone is additional that it's going to add to that. I'm just going to keep it at 1 hertz so that it's just the sound that we're adding in from the analog MIDI. We get this output. It's not going well. It's not going well. I'm going to be honest with you. It doesn't seem like this is going to be possible. Let me see if there's anything else I can do. The ring modulation stuff is pretty interesting, but the waveform just doesn't sound anywhere near the same as a true frequency modulated sound. I will not be beaten by these limitations. I'm going to do something I've never done before. We're going to crack open Max for Live, and if that doesn't work, then what are we doing here? What are we doing here? I've made my own synth. I will not be beaten by these silly tools. It's ugly as hell, but we have those audio samples that we made using just the sine waves from analog, making a damn FM synth. Even if I had to make it from scratch using Max for Live, we have an FM synth. Check out this waveform. That's an FM synth. That's an FM synthesizer. I'm going to attempt to explain how this works. I'm going to be real with you. I barely know how this works. I had a lot of help, but I'm going to do my best to talk through what is happening here. And it's just a frequency modulation. It's exactly what we tried to do, but using a tool that allows us to do it because the standard things in Ableton didn't let us do it. So first up, we have these two guys here. We've got the buffer, which is just an array of samples that we're calling the carrier. So this is how you define it. So the first thing is a buffer, and the next thing is just the variable name that you call it. So if I make something and I say buffer, you'll see here it stores audio samples. So this is just an array of audio samples that we can give it. And in this case, this replace thing is just a little label, but we are using this to grab the audio file of the sine wave that we created earlier and add it in. So this is the carrier one. So this is the F1 sine wave. And then the buffer for the modulator is the C4 sine wave, in fact. So these two buffers are the array of audio samples. And then we have these two groove components here. So we've got the groove component for the modulator and a groove component for the carrier. And what these are is essentially audio playback engines. So they take in the buffers from the carrier and the modulator respectively, and actually can play the sound in a looping playback. The top left, one of these nodule things, is what determines the playback speed. So we have this number 1 here, which is telling it basically do your playback at regular speed. If I change this, I believe it will change the speed of the playback from the modulator component. And sig is essentially just taking a number, so in this case an integer, and converting it into an audio signal that can then be passed into this groove thing, because the groove component can't understand just basic numbers. It has to understand it as the context of an audio signal. After we have the playback, this goes into a multiplier. And so essentially it takes the output audio, puts it in here as the first number, and then we multiply that by a number that we are actually controlling. So this is a variable number. We can then use this to multiply the output of the modulator, which essentially changes the depth of the modulation. So we can have it be a slower modulation or a faster modulation, depending on how high this other input number ends up being. We then add 1 to the signal, essentially, because if we don't do that and our modulation depth here, which I guess my face might be in the way of, if this modulation depth was set to 0, then the output would be 0 and we wouldn't hear anything. But we add 1 to this so that if we play it out by pressing this button over here, we get a signal, so we get a bass signal regardless. So at that point, we've got our modulation, we've taken that, C4 note, added some additional modulation to it. If we just set it to 1, it's going to be, or if we set it to 0, it's going to do nothing. If we set it to 1, then we can just modulate the carrier with that. But we take that audio signal, put it into the carrier itself. So we're now taking that audio rate signal, modulating the carrier with it, and then sending that to our stereo output. So that's what we were trying to do in the beginning. We were trying to take the F1 note, which was our bass, our C4 note, which was our 6th harmonic, and then modulate those together. And that's exactly what we've done by creating our own circuit. A couple other things that I had forgot to mention. We have this button here, which is how we make the sound. So you can click that button, and what this will do is trigger this 0, which is just a number, which is going to be the input to both the modulator and the carrier so that they both play at the same time. So this 0, like I said before, the groove, which I guess I'm blocking off yet again, is telling it which sample to start at or where to start at. So by telling it 0, it starts it at 0, which means that both the groove and the carrier play at the exact same time. And finally, I have a loop 1, which I don't know is working actually, but the loop 1 tells it to loop back around to the start of it once it's finished, which I don't think is actually working at the moment. But all of that together, we get our full FM synth built with Max for Live, which is limited. I'll give you that. We haven't got any MIDI keys or anything like that associated with this yet. That's something I could do, but I'm not going to, just out of the principle of beating Ableton Live. You have the little toy in here. I can press this button. Well, first I need to add the samples. F1 as our carrier and C4 as the modulator, which gives us this. An actual FM sound from scratch. So, can you make an FM synth in Ableton Live without using an FM synth? No. You have to make your own.